Berto, Black Mirror, season 7, episode 5, Eulogy, my favorite episode of the season, and my second favorite episode of Black Mirror overall, behind White Christmas. Let's get into it. What do you say?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist, and I'm also a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I teach dogs not to fear bark.
So I want to start by asking everyone, including you, Berto, what story have you written about a past relationship that might be wrong? You know, what story have you just taken for granted that...
Oh, that's fascinating.
You know, maybe is out of whack because you didn't see the letter that was on the hotel floor, or maybe you've just never revisited the story to really evaluate your initial narrative about it. And with reevaluation, you would say, well, maybe I was a little too harsh about the other person, or maybe not harsh enough, you know, depending.
Yeah.
So that's what this episode is about. It stars Paul Giamatti, written by Charlie Brooker and Ella Road. So I'm going to go through the plot here, which is a little bit more detailed than usual because, I don't know, I just love this episode so much. But so Paul Giamatti, he plays Philip, who is a reclusive former musician, and he's living in Cape Cod in his parents' former house, I think. After his parents died, he got the house. And
how did I miss that he was a musician?
Well,
That's interesting.
I've watched the episode 3 times.
Yeah.
So I'm only 80% sure that that's what they initially kind of hint at the beginning of the episode. But anyway, he's at the very least a reclusive person.
Yeah.
And he seems like he's in his mid to late 50s. And I looked up Paul Giamatti's age, and he's 57 now, so he's probably 56 when they made the episode. And I'm 54, you're 50, so... You know, he looks older than 56, but I don't think...
But he's always looked older.
Yeah, right. And he's very Gen X, you know, the way he talks. And Charlie Brooker, I'm guessing, is around this similar age. And so the Gen X-ness of the whole episode is very, very much there. And I think is not cheesy. And, you know, because sometimes I will notice... even things like Stranger Things, which was written about a love for the 80s, but the creators of Stranger Things are younger than us.
Right, so they're skewing their perspective of what's...
Yeah, there's some anachronisms in it that I remember noticing. Me and my wife loved to noticing. We didn't say that back then, you know, like we didn't say talk to the hand in 1985, you know, but anyway... This episode felt very much in line with American Gen X. So Philip, he's contacted by a company called Eulogy, which is the name of the episode. And Eulogy offers a service that allows the users to step into old... Basically, it's the kind of services that are popping up and have been recently that will assist in gathering memories so that... after someone dies, the family members and grievers can share things more easily. You know, have you heard of these kind of companies?
Yeah, I've not used them, but I've seen.
Yeah. Like I looked up a couple. There's a whole bunch of these companies, but one of them is called Storyworth, and it will, you know, like if a family signs up, you as a family give the company a bunch of contact information for all the people that you want to contact.
And they ask for what, stories and pictures and things?
Yeah. And it will send weekly prompts via email or phone, helping individuals write down memories that are later compiled into a keepsake book. And another company called Story.eye, I'm not sure, they use phone prompts to record audio stories, producing a keepsake audiobook without requiring written input. So I found 20 different companies like this, and they all have a different angle. All of them are useful, and I have experience with this sort of thing because I've been in charge of trying to help with memorials like this, and found that if you just send an email, say, hey, send your stories. Or another version is we'll be having a family reunion, and I'll be like, hey, send your stories about
You
this
won't
period.
get much.
I literally will get nothing.
Yeah.
And it's not because people don't want to. It's because for most people, there's this huge barrier between the desire and the execution for whatever reason. And so these companies will kind of hound you with spam to get you to respond. And by doing so, it's meaningful for everyone. Now, I'm sure there's some collateral damage where someone's just like, get off my back, I don't want to do it. But I think for 95% of people, it actually will produce something that you can share, and it can be very helpful. A mini version of this is before a memorial to just reach out to some people and say, hey, I'd love it if you could share a story. So I'm going to call on you at the beginning when people start sharing stories. And then I actually had that happen with me when Paul David had his living wake. He himself actually asked me to lead things off. And it, I was already thinking I would say something, but him telling me, hey, I want you to say something, prompted me to prepare something, and to think about what I wanted to say, the vibe, and also to not make it so rambly, like I was like, well, if I'm going to lead things off, I should probably think about what I'm going to say. And it did help. So these kind of services are long. So Philip gets contacted by one of these companies. And because it's Black Mirror, it has that little thing on the side of the head with AI. And this service, on the surface anyway, is a service that allows you to enter into the service says, pull out old photographs of the deceased, and we will explore stories. And then they never really explicitly discussed what this would end up looking like at the memorial, but I got the impression that by exploring the picture, so Philip had a very complicated relationship, but I'm guessing if it was like a sister who had a good relationship with the deceased, there would be an exploration of maybe thousands of pictures, but there would be maybe 5 that the AI and the bereaved would identify, and they would say, okay, I remember when we were 5 and we went on the slip and slide, and I just remember how I broke my leg and she was there for me. And then the memorial shows the picture and has this little voiceover of the sister saying this, and this is for people to view at the memorial or something like that. That was the impression I got, right?
And it probably could recreate scenes partially. One question I have, because they use the tech where he puts the little circle on his temple like they use in all the other episodes. And this helps him go into this 3D simulation where he sees, and there were some cool things about it because obviously it's very hand wavy, but like memory, your memories are very fuzzy. So he'll see like parts of the photo, and then the 3D, it tries to 3D extrapolate the whole room, but of course it doesn't know what it doesn't know. And he's trying to remember, and it's obvious that it's got a connection to his memories, because as soon as he's remembering things, it fills in the gaps of the 3D space. And so to your point, I was wondering if they would also show some of those 3D spaces to people, or if that was just for the purposes of remembering. I didn't know if there would be some sort of installation where you could walk through her memory or their memories or something like that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. The impression I got was that the AI was instructed to help in whatever way they could to get the end result, which was the story along with the picture. And if the individual could just look at the picture and tell a story, then that would be good enough, But if they had trouble remembering the details, the AI was instructed to assist by suggesting, hey, let's enter the photo, because that's kind of the way things play out, right?
Yeah.
So the question I have for you, Berta, though, is the AI assistant, unknown to Philip in the beginning, is an AI representation of the daughter.
That's right.
Of the daughter of Carol, the woman who died, his ex-girlfriend. Why would the company Eulogy have a representation of the daughter, physical and personality-wise, memory-wise? The AI representation had all the memories that the daughter did. and had the needs, the emotional needs of the daughter infused in the AI. Why would they design it that way? Why couldn't it just be like Siri, that kind of thing?
So I thought about this too, and part of me started thinking, wait a minute. I wondered if, I don't doubt that the company is real, and maybe that's just normally what they do, but I was like, I wonder if she kind of enlisted the company because was she trying to get the music out of his memory, or did she already know the song? Like, I was curious about that. Was she like, I want to play this song, but I don't have the music sheet and I don't remember, but maybe he remembers. And then she tricks him essentially into finding the song.
Yeah, I had thought about that angle.
You know?
Well, it's funny as a musician, you're thinking that way. Yeah. But it'd be perhaps more relevant for the daughter, knowing what she knows, which we don't know until later in the episode, that the daughter, the real daughter, would just be kind of curious as to what this guy was all about, and why my mom had this complicated memory of this guy.
Yeah, there's that for sure. Because I was thinking, okay, him remembering her face doesn't matter to the daughter because the daughter remembers her mom's face. She never had a relationship with him, and he's not her father. So she's not like, ta-da, you're my father, right? So I was like, why is she doing this?
Well, on the surface anyway, the way that they lay it out is that in the process of the aftermath of the mother dying, the daughter, she just did a blanket send out of, in the same way that I described some of these services of today, where you have the bereaved and all the various different planning and organizing that you have to do. You meet with a consultant at this company, and they're just like, okay, so
what do you want us to send?
Can you give us a list? And then you just start rattling off everyone that you know. Yeah. And it was just kind of an afterthought, and maybe even the daughter thought like, well, maybe something will happen, but maybe not. At the very least, he should be notified that she died, I guess. But I've got a lot of other things that I'm more worried about, and that's and by this happenstance, it triggers him. You know what I mean?
My theory is this, because I was thinking, well, hold on, did they use the same avatar for everyone?
I think possibly,
so.
I think so. Yeah.
But most people that stayed within their lives would know who she is, right? So she wouldn't be like, hi, I'm a random avatar. It'd be more like, hi, I'm her daughter, and I'm here to help you remember things, right? But for him, she hides that fact. Right?
Well, then later in the episode, he is like, why didn't you tell me that you're a representation of the daughter? And she's like, well, you told me to skip the intro.
Oh, right. She did say that. That's true. That's convenient. Okay. Yeah, I forgot about that. Okay, so let's give him the benefit of the doubt. But I still hold my theory. I'll go on Reddit. And I'll start a thread and I won't poo-poo it. But I think she wanted to play that song and she needed to find it. And she sent out the thing, but maybe with him,
it's a really bad attempt because he almost bagged out of the whole process right from the start.
But that was her only choice.
No, a much better choice would have been she could have literally called him and said, can I have that cassette? Or do you have any recordings?
But he didn't have it.
He did. He had a cassette recording of her playing cello.
Oh.
He had a cassette.
He didn't have to remember the song.
He had a cassette, yeah.
That destroys my theory, damn it.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Then I guess it was
I see what you're saying. So if he didn't have a cassette and he had to remember, but he wouldn't remember, but also if she wanted, again, a bad attempt, if that's the case, a much more straightforward way to be like, hey, I don't know what went on with you and my mom, but I really would love...
No. I've solved it. Because if she calls him, think about it. She calls him out of the blue. Hello, who is this? So you dated my mom, and you're not my father, but like, she's like, well, that biatch who dumped me? No, screw you, bye. Because he hasn't gone through the emotional journey. So she, being a Black Mirror writer, was very prescient and knew that he had to go through the emotional journey to get to the point where he would remember the song. Because remember, she doesn't know that he's got a tape.
Well, you could say all sorts of things about but on the surface anyway, I think as you were saying, the vast majority of people that received this package in the mail, which, by the way, drone delivery, which our friend Cedric actually works on with Amazon.
Right.
Did you know that's currently happening?
Oh, yeah.
That drones are delivering packages?
Yes.
Yeah. Particularly in rural areas because it's harder to get a truck out there. But yeah, he's an engineer and works on all the different technical aspects of it, because not only is it technically kind of hard to have a drone that is automated, right? But there's a loading and there's the navigating the privacy, because if you're in someone's, because typically they want to do it in someone's backyard, which is kind of a benefit, right? Like for porch pirates, you can just put it on the back porch. It's much harder to steal from back there, right? And so,
except when they start using drones to steal.
Yeah, right. I hadn't thought about that. Anyway, so he gets that. So for most people that get this thing, the daughter is a motivator for people to actually, pay attention to this.
Yeah.
If you're a cousin and it's just a random avatar, you might be less. So, that was one thing. But another reason that they actually state in the episode is that the AI is programmed with the daughter's preferences of what she would have liked to be included. If it's just a random avatar, they're just like, hey, what memories? And the person's like, well, geez, I got a lot of memories. Well, the daughter, the AI version is programmed
steering it.
Saying, well, this is what me and my family would like to see, blah, blah. Anyway.
That makes sense.
So going on with the plot, the company tells Philip that his ex-girlfriend, Carol, had died. And her daughter wants Philip to work with Eulogy to create memories for the memorial. And we have been talking about that. So moving on in my notes here. So the disc on the temple, the little device on the temple, and they look at photos. They kind of step into the photos. The photos look very 90s, by the way, which I thought was a good touch.
Yeah.
The way in which the kind of point and shoot cameras or the disposable cameras and their shitty developing and bad flashes and stuff. So they do that. And we, just a little detail, then I think the first photo, there's a recognition of Stone Roses, the album that was kind of big at the time. And did you have a relationship with that album?
Well, because of Shun, yes.
Okay.
So when I got to college, Shun was my roommate, and he was huge into the Stone Roses, and he had the album, and I started listening to it, so I fell in love with it too.
Man, when I discovered that album, the Stone Roses album, the first album, the first out of two albums that they made, was a very college thing. Like very few people knew it. People might have known that sort of hit song that they had, but the rest of the album is better, really, and really quite tonally different than the song that they became famous for from that album. But that album, to this day, is a go-to in my every track, and the emotions and
it's
the vibe.
So good.
And so it was just kind of a nice little touch. Anyway, then we learn through the AI exploring these photos, Philip, and it's a great TV episode device to reminisce and show technology and the ability to step in, to these memories. He's stepping in, and there's a person that he has to explain things to, so it gives him the ability to verbally okay, here's this thing that, and it's just a beautiful device for an episode,
And it's great because you see little bits of side stories that end up being relevant, developing from photo to photo. Like, who's that? Oh, I don't remember her name or whatever. Like you see,
yeah. I get chills thinking about just how hard it would have been to lay out those details organically.
Right.
And also just a testament to Paul Giamatti's acting. I mean, this is
so good.
We know Paul Giamatti.
Yeah.
But it felt so fucking real, man.
Wasn't that our favorite movie from last year?
The Holdovers?
The Holdovers?
Yeah, so good. Yeah. So we learned that he was in a band with Carol, again, very Gen X to be in a band in the early 90s, and also very of the time.
Right. No, you're right. Because he played He played guitar, and then there was this other lead singer.
Well, he played bass in the band.
Bass?
Yeah, he played bass. Yeah,
I thought he played guitar.
Well, he had my guitar amp, my Fender Blues Deluxe. I could tell in the background, or at least a knockoff.
And then she was playing keys.
She played keys. Yeah. Which is another kind of okay. So I just want to go on a little tangent about the whole band representation. So I was really happy that they didn't show the band playing, because Hollywood always fucks up bands playing. Always. Commercials.
Sure.
There'll be a commercial about a band playing, and it's always laughably off kilter, or there'll be a wedding scene with a band that's playing at the wedding, and I can just tell. I mean, you can too, right?
Yep.
That none of these people are musicians. I mean, it would be so easy to find an extra. If someone has lines, then okay, you need an actor. But if they're just going to stand there and mime that they're playing along with a song, just grab any old person that has the minimal experience playing guitar. I mean, it's laughable how it's like watching a Robert Palmer video. And so it's always horrible. And I was like, oh no, they're not going to show but they didn't. So that was good. But on the downside, there were two things about that band segment that bugged me. One was that Carol, she's playing what looks to be kind of like a Rhodes electric piano knockoff that undoubtedly would have been too expensive for that band.
Okay. Sure.
The kind of classic Rhodes, and it didn't look like an actual Fender Rhodes, but it looked like some version of that.
Although, I don't know, maybe like a dusty trading musician acquisition.
Yeah, so maybe.
Yeah.
But still, I, as a musician, especially in the 90s, when people had keyboards, the other thing is there weren't a lot of bands in the early 90s that had keyboards. But if you did have keyboards, it would have been a shitty-ass, literally a Casio or a Yamaha, like a $300 job, But anyway, so that was just one little thing. Yeah. The other thing that bugged me was that so Carol plays cello, played cello in real life, and Philip, he is telling the daughter AI, I convinced her to play keyboards, and the AI is like, did you ask her? Because maybe she wanted to play cello in the band, and I don't know if Brooker was hinting at maybe this AI isn't exactly rational, because that's an irrational thing to say to what looked to be an indie rock band.
I think you might be giving it too much credit, because I think it was meant to be like you were being insensitive.
Right.
But no,
like a fucking cello.
I had the same thought. I was like, well, he could have for a different band. I don't know. Like, if you want to be, it's like, we played in a band, it's like, if you have a specific thing you're going for, it's hard to be like, oh, you play tuba? Sure, we'll work it in,
Right. Yeah, and, take it from us. No one plays in a band and sticks with it when they're being forced.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there are so many ways in which lack of motivation will ruin the situation. So the fact that she was in the band and playing keyboards meant she must have gotten something out of it. You know what I mean? And to claim that it was insensitive to like not let her play cello in a
also that is that can only be written by someone that doesn't actually, that is not a musician who plays in bands, I think.
Yeah.
The only exception is perhaps if you are a very, very highly specialized classical or jazz musician and you play, this one. But as you know, in rock bands, oftentimes you wear different hats. You want to be in the band. You want to play out. So if you're a musician, you're oftentimes going to play. I've played bass. I've played guitar. You've played drums. Like I've sang sometimes I don't sing. Now I play piano in my, like there's different hats you wear.
Right.
So that was kind of a very like interesting thing. I could see how someone, and maybe that could be the case if the avatar wasn't trained on a musician, but she is a musician. So maybe they didn't train it very well, because the avatar would have been like, that's cool that you included her in your band.
I mean, regardless of what the writer was thinking at the time, I'm thinking at the AI bot, Like, come on, girl.
Yes.
A cello in a indie rock band in 1992.
Too pretentious.
Yeah. Like, they would have been laughed on the stage. How do you mic that fucking thing? How do you write for it? Keyboards are much more flexible and easy to transport. Anyway, let's take a break. We get back. That's the end of the bad things, and let's go forward with the plot. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. So, Philip, he is remembering the good times and the bad times. He mentions that he and Carol in their early 20s dated for 3 years and were very much in love and moved in together, blah, blah, blah. He says that one day she just left him with no explanation, and they never talked again. And he became depressed and drank a lot. This is later on in the episode when they've explored a lot of things. He's just like, well, the reason why things are bad or I have bad memories is because she just ditched me one day without explanation. And we haven't talked since then. And
which, by the way, so cool how you're just let in these little windows a little bit at a time. The episode starts, you're like, why is he so annoyed about this? Is he such a curmudgeon? He doesn't want to give a little bit of time to a memory of someone he knew, right? It's great. It's like, I see.
And, maybe it's just for our generation. I don't know, for Gen Xers or maybe people that are close to our generation, of the shoebox of photographs that you will destroy upon breaking up with someone that are just really hard to look at, I don't know if there's a version of that with digital photos. Can you get a digital way of like crossing out their faces or something? Or you just delete those photos in today's world or something? I don't know. Yeah. But, so relevant and real and all of us have either done or have people close to us who have done exactly what he was doing. Right. You take a marker and So he's taught, the AI is like, why are you so kind of bitter? He's like, well, she left me, no explanation, and we never talked again. I became depressed and I drank a lot and I was in a hole for 15 years. It took me 15 years to recover. Wow. And now he's still sad and bitter, but he's not in as much of a hole. Right. But he's been living a reclusive life ever since then because of what happened. For 35 years or 30 years, he's been living in alone and resolved to be alone. So, it looks, we don't know exactly what happened with him. Right. That's what he's basically putting out there. And the AI, again, we don't know it's the daughter at this point, is prompting him in this very subtle way to continue to explore the story. Because there are many times when he's just like, I'm done. I don't need to do this. And she's like, well, how about we do this? And he's like, well, okay.
And remember, at first he was like, I only have 3 photos, Yeah. And so, you kind of think, I was even thinking at the moment, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, we'll see 3 different little vignettes. But obviously he was avoiding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was an undeveloped camera that had 1 photo on it that was relevant, but still.
But he knew that might have something.
Yeah.
He also knew he had a box.
Right.
Yeah.
So they explore the story some more, and his story is that she left him and didn't care. He's and beautifully written and acted. Just that way that you talk, the way that you hear your friends talk about, she didn't give a shit about me. She never cared about me. She flirted, and one day she just left me and left me alone. And, I can't recreate it, but, it's just know that I was watching. It's like, oh my God, and I wasn't even really thinking about it until afterwards, just how real it all felt.
Yeah. It felt totally legit.
Yeah. In a way that I don't know if I've ever seen another movie or TV show depict this extremely common experience of humans.
Yeah.
Anyway. And then it kind of comes up because they're in one of the photos, because the AI is like, well, what's going on over here? And he starts to admit, well, yeah, Carol thought I was flirting with this coworker, but I wasn't. We fought about it all the time. And then we learned that Carol got a job in London. And while Carol was in London, Philip cheated with the coworker, and Carol called randomly.
Right.
And the coworker picked up the phone, and Carol finds out that Philip had been cheating, and they fight some more. And then it looks like they're kind of at the precipice of maybe never being together again. But he's like, no, I'm sorry that I cheated, and I want to go to England, and I'm going to propose to her, and we can start a life. And I want to finalize this whole thing. So he flies to England, and he's meeting up with her at dinner, and he's really nervous, and she's late or he's early. He gets drunk, and he proposed to her at the restaurant in front of all these people. And she's, in his retelling of the story, she's like in silence. She just doesn't say anything. We learn later why she was silent, but that's his story. And as she's sitting there just staring at him after he proposed, he's like, everyone's looking at me. I'm mortified. I'm humiliated. And I pounded on the table, and she stood up and left, and I never talked to her again. And so fuck her. She doesn't care. She, cheated on me and, or whatever, Right. At that point, he didn't know that. He just thought she was a flirt and didn't care about it.
Yeah, because at that moment, he doesn't even know that she had her own revenge affair, and he doesn't know that she went back to the hotel room. She doesn't know well, he might have thought if she got her stuff maybe or something.
Right. But, yeah, I was even thinking there's a bit of Romeo and Juliet in here.
Oh, yes, there is. Yeah.
How so?
And like that tragedy of like
misunderstanding.
You just missed each other by like a couple sentences.
Right. That I actually rewatched the Baz Luhrmann version. Is that his name? I loved. Leo and what's her name, Claire Danes. I loved that when it came out in the 90s. Today it's a little goofy at some points, but when and the soundtrack I would listen to all the time, and I just loved it. And I rewatched it a month ago. I didn't love it as much, but still, and the ending. I think if you're into that sort of thing and you sort of hand yourself over to the Shakespeare of it all, I think it's a pretty effective.
Powerful and
anyway,
sad.
But yeah, that sort of if you had just said one more word, and also the fact that he thought she was flirting, so he got hurt and cheated. Right. And then she finds out he's cheating, and then she cheats.
I know.
It's just like anyway. So. Because, in the end, we kind of learned like they both deeply loved each other.
That's right.
And wanted to be together and were good together. And what a wasted
What
life.
A waste.
Yeah.
I know.
So he, pounds on the table. She stands up, leaves. And then he's just like, she didn't care. I flew all the way out there. I proposed and she didn't even answer. She didn't care. And that's it. The AI confronts him about his narrative. And then she reveals that she's Carol's daughter, an AI version. She reveals that Carol would have been pregnant at the time that he proposed with her due to a one-night stand that she had, a revenge cheating, as you put it. The AI says that Carol said that she had left him a note. The daughter's like, well, my mom always said that she left you a note, but you never responded, so she knew that you didn't want to be with her. And
she doesn't, because that scene is actually really good too, because I think what she says is like, she wrote you, which I interpreted like she sent him a letter and he like, I'm not going to write back. But we haven't seen that. That's not what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, the writing and the acting from Giamatti,
because he's like, she never wrote me.
Well, yes, but there's this, I get chills thinking about this performance, that there's like that pain, like, wait, she wrote me?
Yeah.
No, I did. Oh, like it just happened.
Right.
Even, like he was the next day being accused of it. It's that present for him. You know what I mean?
Right.
He wasn't like, oh, I don't remember a letter. It's like, no, she didn't write me. No.
Why, of course, that would be everything.
What do you say? I would have responded. They developed that disposable camera, again, very 90s.
Which, again, another great moment, because the photo could have been her putting the letter on the, whatever, it's cheesy thing. But instead, it's like a photo where you first look at it, you're like, okay, it's a waste. That was a dead end.
Right. And the story, without depicting it really, is that he goes back to the hotel. He's drunk and he destroys the hotel. And he has this disposable camera. Presumably he bought it because he was going to take pictures of the two of them having a fun time in London. And in his drunk despair, he just rattles off one photo. He's like, oh, I'll just snap. And he's not really even taking a photo of anything.
Right.
And then that's the only photo that's on the disposable camera. And it's just this random photo of the floor.
Yeah.
And even if you saw it, you wouldn't really know anything. But he's like, yeah, you can kind of see evidence that I'd torn apart the office. He didn't really destroy the hotel room, but he'd sort of thrown stuff around. And there's this little note on the ground. And again, the acting, he's like desperately trying to pull the note off the ground. And the AI
I felt it.
And the AI feels bad. She's just like, oh no, it doesn't. Sorry, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
because it's not in the picture. You can't. So then. The AI helps him, jogs his memory as it's supposed to do, and he's like, "Wait, I might actually have the note because I put everything in a bag and I never wanted to revisit it again." This sort of lack of grieving, and he actually finds the letter, and the letter says that Carol was sorry for not, and she left it in the hotel room because she had a key to the hotel room, and she said that. She was sorry she didn't say anything when he proposed, but she didn't know what to say because she was so racked with guilt and shame because she had a one-night stand, the revenge cheating, and she was suspecting she might be pregnant. And she was confused because she was thinking she wanted to keep the baby, and what she wanted, her dream, was to raise the kid with him.
Right.
But she didn't know how he would feel about it and would understand if he hated her and particularly didn't want to spend the rest of his life with her. So she was putting it in his hands of, now that you know, you need to know this before you propose to me. I'll be waiting at my work after work tomorrow, and if you don't show up, I totally understand. Again, very 90s because, sorry, I almost fell over. Very 90s because there's no cell phones.
There's no cell phone.
You can't text or anything.
Yeah.
So a lot of, I actually forget exactly how we knew to meet up. Because we did, we were socializing all the time. Now there was, phones and voicemail and stuff, but it's kind of weird that we managed to be together, me and a pretty large group of friends all the time. And
how would you synchronize?
How did we synchronize?
I've ran into this recently because I was recently on a couple different trips with coworkers, and I don't have my work email on my phone at all. It's just my personal phone.
That's good.
That's great normally, but when we're on these trips, we're coordinating to go meet for dinner somewhere. Now I show up at the time at the place, and there's no one. Well, I come to find out they had sent a message in the work messaging saying, oh, actually that place closes. Let's go meet at this other place. And I am sitting there and I'm like, not only do I not, I'm figuring it out. I'm like, you know what? I bet you they changed plans. I have no way to know what plans they changed, where to go. I can't contact anyone because I don't have any of their real phone numbers. I only have their work information. And I don't know any one of them outside of work or anyone that knows them outside of work. So I can't contact anyone. So I had to go all the way back to my hotel, open my laptop and be like, this is what. But I felt that feeling of like, what do you do? Yeah. How do you contact someone?
Yeah. So they find the letter and he reads it, and it's this powerful scene. And with this new knowledge, Berto, he seems to be at peace, which is kind of interesting because you would think, so, before reading this letter, his narrative was she never cared about me.
Right.
And I'm a piece of shit, or I can't trust people, or she was a complete jerkface. After learning this, he himself inadvertently caused the circumstances so that he completely lost out on a wonderful life with her,
right.
and the daughter and maybe other kids, that he completely and because he, increasingly starts to recognize that he has problems, and he's willing to admit that, pretty quickly, the drinking and the anger and the overreactivity about flirting, which is, not uncommon for anyone, particularly when you're young and in your 20s and stuff. And he has this new understanding of, oh my God, both unluckness, but also my own rage and drinking and bitterness resulted in me completely missing the train of my life.
Yeah.
And I've been stuck in this train station of bitterness my entire life.
Yeah.
You would think after that point he'd get a gun and shoot himself in the head.
Sure.
But he doesn't.
No.
He actually feels better. Why?
Yeah, it's this.
Well, I'm going to take a break and get back and answer the question. All right, we're back from the break. Why, Berto? Why?
Yeah, I feel like it's this moment of a combination of things. One, in that moment, it rewrites, it like retcons the story, so he doesn't feel as devalued, anywhere near as devalued as he did.
Yeah.
That's one. Number two, and this, it is sad, but he's like, oh, there was a chance for us, right? Then number three, it also humanizes the person because up until that moment, he probably couldn't even conceptualize who does that, who just walks away without a care in the world, which is terribly sad because from her perspective, the same thing happened. Right. He never showed up. So both of them had this narrative of like...
But at least she had an explanation. It was wrong.
But she doesn't know he didn't get the note.
Right, but it was wrong. But and I'm not saying it's great for her,
Right.
but at least she would say, oh, well, he understandably, and maybe because he's kind of a jerk face, he didn't want to raise a kid that's not his.
Right. He was missing even more information. So, but all of a sudden...
from his perspective, she's
a monster or a weird robot or something.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it's like...
I guess he could say, well, I cheated, so that's why she decided.
But all of a sudden, she's back to being a human. He's like, he can kind of relate like to the sequence of events. So yeah, it's this kind of super bittersweet but yet beautiful moment of, oh, I can exhale for once in however long it's been.
Yeah. And, on a personal note, I, as you know, am the sort of person that holds on to photos. And actually, my childhood friend, Lita, who we started the podcast with.
Lovely Lita.
17 years ago. She has recently told me how much she regrets having at some point gotten rid of a lot of old stuff, just not out of anger, but just out of like, I want to move forward in life. And so she threw away photos and journals and I don't know all the specifics, but something like that. And I have kept everything. And knowing that, even when I started my journal when I was 13 years old, I suspected, I didn't know, that when I was older, I would just want to know. I just out of curiosity what was going through my head. And when I was 20 and my dad had a video camera, I suspected that when I was 50, I would want to see. I would want to have a little video recording of me and my friends. And so I took the time to actually make that, even though no one cared to make it. No one cared to watch it. It was an annoying thing. It was a bit of a process, especially to like hold on to it over the years and digitize it and da-da-da. But I have kept all that. So this episode is very much up my alley because there are times at 3 a.m. when I will look at old videos or old photos for various different reasons along these lines. And how it provokes this sort of thing, and just how many people, less so as I get older, because as me and my peers get older, people tend to be like, oh, I kind of wish that I was like you and held on to these things. But when I was younger, especially in my teens and 20s, people were just like, why are you holding on to this shit? It's so lame. You're such a it's
hoarder.
Well, not only that, but you're living in the past.
Sure.
You're like Al Bundy with his ideas of being on the varsity football team. Like you're longing for this past. Like let it go. And I just said, well, no, I love my life currently. I don't want to go back, but I'm pretty sure in another another number of years, I'm gonna. And what's the harm?
Well, in your case, because I could see, like, in fact, I had those kind of sort of bad tendencies of. It wasn't even from keeping memories. It was more like up until my first child was born, a lot of times, all the time actually, I wanted to go back and redo things because I was like, damn it, I want a second go at this. I want a second go at this. And it was kind of an obsessive thought, like, I'm not happy with how this turned out. So I could see someone doing it for those reasons, like, I wish I could go back to this because that was so much better. And that could get it could get pathological. I could see it.
Maybe. But honestly, I don't know if I've ever seen that before. If anything, holding on to the photos and videos and notes and whatnot, if the person is gravitationally pulled to stare at the photo and wonder what could have been, taking away the photo wasn't going to take away that longing. The photo just brings that out and gives the person an opportunity to start processing those feelings.
I wasn't talking about holding onto the photos themselves. I was referring to what your friends might have been projecting or thinking is that, some people, myself included, can get uncomfortably attached to either something they miss or wanting to relive a thing or wanting to change something, and it can start affecting their present, which is definitely not great.
But in all likelihood, another way of looking at that is that as your body and mind would have a compulsion to think about that regret, you're processing something. There's some health to that. It is representing some pain or regret or unmet need. And maybe you're not listening to yourself, but to just, this blanket statement of like, well, just don't do that, is probably not going to solve the problem.
Actually, it might even be the other way around, because in my case, for example, I didn't have journals and photos to go back to. It was just in my memory going like, I wish I could, let's see. This happened every night. I'd be like, okay, I want to go back, and I'd try to pick the specific date and time where I wanted to wake up the next morning being at. And then I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do different. I'm not going to do this. Basically, it was...
What kind of scenario did you
I'd be like, okay, I'm going to show up that first day I arrived at 15 from Colombia, and here's what I'm going to start. Like, okay, I'm not going to go to that picnic, or I guess I don't have a choice. But then, but the first day of school, and I would plan out all these things.
Would you be correcting for?
Oh, like the amount of time I wasted not practicing piano, or the amount of time I wasted doing this, or the money I didn't save, or any number of things. And it was obsessive, and it was every night. But it was all in my head. I wonder if I had gone back and read my journal of the time or looked at photos and been like, oh, wait a minute. I don't know if I would have done anything differently.
Yeah.
Or wow, life is complicated. Yeah. And you have, like those kinds of things.
And I'm biased, of course, but that has happened to me where I will have questions like that, regrets or questions, and will read my journal and see, it was a lot different than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, going on. So I want to read some bad reviews from IMDb.
Oh, no. Okay.
Let's see.
Because I think both you and I gave this one a 10, right?
Well, I don't know. I didn't know if I've heard what you gave it. What would you give it?
A 10.
Okay. This person gave it a 1, and they say, this episode just left me nothing but annoyed. We currently live in a time where sexes are perpetually placed at war with one another, yet one side seems to get a clear pass on bad decisions. Just chiming in, what do you think they're referring to at this point?
That the woman gets away with her bad decisions and has a great, wonderful life, and the guy is penalized for his bad decisions because guys bad, women good.
Right. It's going on. Cheating on a current fiance, that's fine. You found a better person. Good on you. Got jealous about your partner's colleague? Make them jealous back by flirting in plain sight. So empowering. Suspect your partner of cheating? Go sleep with someone else, despite having no concrete evidence. Stunning and brave. made poor choices and gotten pregnant without telling your partner, ignore their own feelings and proposal attempts and run away. Leave a paper note that can get lost and then make zero future attempts to communicate. Inspiring. Any thoughts on that, Bruno?
Well, again, a lot of times I feel like we watch different episodes. For one thing, I don't see where in this it was presented as anything less than a tragedy for her as well.
Right.
That she didn't end up reconnecting with him.
Right.
I also didn't get the sense at all that there was any glorification to her revenge affair in spite of a daughter coming out of it. It just doesn't. Yeah. Basically, it's a projection of their feelings about it, right? Yeah. But it's not what the episode shows.
No. Yeah. Going for it. Yeah. Another one. Worst episode in Black Mirror. As a longtime fan of Black Mirror, I'm honestly baffled by the praise this episode is getting. It lacked the core Black Mirror elements, the dark tech twists, high tech, moral complexity, and thought-provoking storytelling. Black Mirror usually leaves me disturbed, challenged, or inspired. This one just left me bored. Berto, what do you think?
Well, I disagree. I by this point in my reviews, I had stopped doing the Black Mirror points because I don't know, it wasn't working for me. But I did give this one a 10. I didn't give any of the other ones a 10. The best was 9, 2 9s I gave. But it had tech, and it didn't just have random tech. It had tech that is coming, sort of, right? Like, we already have AI simulations that can extrapolate from photos, all these things. It had the thing where you can put it on your temple. Okay, that's a little much, but still, it had that aspect, and it had some dark aspects about it because, like, this character was actually with memories and personality from a real person, and it caused struggle, right? It had a lot of nuance and conflict in it.
Yeah, this is, like you said, not stepping into this AI generated world might be a little much with the temple thing, but in terms of an AI bot that is trained on a bunch of knowledge and maybe pushed in a particular direction based on guesses of personality of someone, could something like this happen? Yeah. And could something like this profoundly change someone's life, right?
Yeah.
If, for you, for example, Berto, if AI was trained on as much data as it could get their hands on about, like, I'm trying to imagine, like, maybe you've talked about how there was this ex-girlfriend in high school, for example.
Oh, yes, this would be great.
And let's say that an AI shows up at your door and you start chatting with it because you can't have a temple thing, but and it's trained on maybe this ex-girlfriend from high school kept a journal and had pictures and stuff. And it just starts asking you questions. And at first, you have one narrative, but over time, it starts to introduce other elements, even just based on your own memory. It's just like, well, I remember this. And they're like, well, how about this? And you're like, oh, that's like it could be a profoundly life-altering thing, even with taking today's tech and just applying it in a particular way. So, yeah, it's an absolutely right up the middle Black Mirror episode.
I wonder if this writer, maybe I'm impugning their character, but because the one thing about this episode is that, as you know, we both did not like the first episode of the whole series, the pig episode. Yeah. But this episode has pig vomit, so it makes up for it.
Yeah, so I kept some notes on different areas of social critique that we've already talked about, but just to highlight some of these things. So it goes deep into a bunch of memory themes and narrative themes, which is very much up my alley as a therapist. It goes into a theme of the kind of new style of memorials that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
Instead of just passing around a microphone and people talking, it can use media that you yourself actually have as a way of jogging and producing meaningful memories. I'm surprised this isn't done more often, actually. The availability of media, even for an elderly person today, is out there. There's got to be a fair amount of video that they've been involved in if they have loved ones, you know, and I'm always surprised at how little that is done. In fact, an ex-girlfriend of mine actually died a few years ago, and just in my own grieving process, I gathered videos that I had from her from the 90s, incidentally, early 90s, and I just for my own grieving process just watched it, and then I just found myself editing a little vignette or a little, I don't know what you call it, little video of the different moments that were highlighting her. Because, you know, when I take video, I rarely video myself.
Sure.
I'm almost always videoing what I see. And so, because if I were to video me, I figure, well, that's not my memory. I'm not,
right.
I'm not looking at myself.
Unless you're looking at a mirror.
Yeah, my videos are a representation of what I perceive in the world, you know? And so I compiled some stuff from that, and as another thought, like the next day, I'm like, oh, maybe I should share this with the family, and so I shared it with them, and they completely flipped out, in a positive way. They're like, oh my God, and I haven't, barely talked to her family, in ages, 30 years, I guess it would be, right?
Yeah.
So they remembered me, but they're just like, oh my God. And I got the impression that I had the only video of her.
Probably, dude.
But it's fucking weird because if you're someone that's around up until 2021 or 2022, there's been the capability of videoing, and this is video from the 90s when they didn't even have camcorders.
Right.
They didn't even have those little mini camcorders. This was a giant camera with a VCR that hung from your side. You had to carry around the VCR, and that was the camera I was using. And so to have that stuff is extremely valuable. So I'm really surprised at how little that is being used. And so this episode highlights that hopeful future for myself anyway.
Yeah.
Another theme, it gets to our version of stories, right? He had a version of a story coming into this episode and emerged with a very different, more accurate version of the story. And I talk about this a lot, particularly in my reaction videos, that there will be a breakup or something and people will frame it, like on Love is Blind, they'll be at the reunion and there will be someone that will seemingly be framing the relationship that didn't work out ultimately, but they will, in my view, be choosing the worst possible narrative. He never loved me. He gaslit me. He tricked me. He never seriously proposed to me. He tricked me. Literally. I'm probably downplaying it to some extent. And okay, maybe he's a sadistic psychopath, or maybe things just didn't work out. And what a better to propose that, especially if you're a friend, right, would be, depending on the situation, seen as dismissive and siding with him. Like you're trying to make him look good. What's wrong with you? You're supposed to be my friend or my therapist. But when I'm in those shoes of trying to propose those other narratives, I'm actually trying to help the person who was dumped, because for the person who was dumped to walk away with what I believe to be a completely distorted narrative, that narrative will harm and traumatize you.
Yeah, absolutely.
To write a story, there's data. There are facts on the ground that happened, and to frame it as I was tricked and I'm stupid and I can't trust other people and I'm doomed and men are this way is not only just going to plague you, but will set you up to distrust and be overreactive to signs of this in the future that might not actually be happening, and it could ruin your life. So for him, that's what happened.
What happened.
He wrote a story that was the most negative and walked away not only with 15 years of despair and drinking and suicidality, but even after he recovered, seemingly never went back to the well, because why do that if you're just going to get hurt because people don't care about you or I'm a piece of shit, no one's going to love me.
So, this is quite personal to me in a way, because my dad had something like that happened to him. You know, he went through this very painful breakup with my mom, and he wrote a narrative about it. And I don't think he ever recovered from that narrative, you know? So it's likely a common problem.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I mean, your dad, in a lot of ways, thematically wise, is like Philip.
Yeah.
The
other thing that comes to mind is, so I might have told you this, but so I had a song that I wrote in 1996 that was based on something that happened to me when I was a kid, when I was about, I think 10 maybe or 9. So the song is called The Greatest Day. And the thing that happened was that everyone forgot my birthday. Like, you know, imagine you're a little kid. Birthdays are super important. It's a big deal. And I wake up that morning and, you know, my grandma, my dad, my grandma's sister, no one wishes me a happy birthday. So I'm thinking, okay, that's odd. Oh, there might be a secret surprise party. I go off to school. At school, of course, no one knows it's my birthday, so no one wishes me a happy birthday. I come home after school, and I'm expecting a surprise party. There's no surprise party. No one mentions it. I come in. Then it comes time for dinner, and I'm at dinner, and still nothing. And I'm thinking, when is the... So finally, towards the end of dinner, I'm like, is no one going to mention anything? And they're like, oh, you know, it's like this big moment of realization and horror that they had forgotten my birthday. Well, this was quite traumatic for me, right? I was like, jeez, they forgot my birthday. So I went all the years, and in 1996, when I was in college, I wrote this song called The Greatest Day about this. And the song was, you know, about basically what I just narrated are the verses of the song. And then the chorus is like, the greatest day, I get to choose what to play. The greatest day, it's so much fun. The greatest day of all. You know, it's like ironic sentiment. Okay. So time goes by, and I came back to revisit it, to re-record it, because I recorded it like actually back at the Art Institute of Seattle. It was kind of like a crappy demo recording, but I wanted to really do it. You know, so I rewrote kind of the piano parts, and I did it all up, and I was working on the lyrics, and I tweaked a few lyrics because, you know, I was a lot younger, so I've gotten a little better. And one thing that always bugged me is I didn't have a really good lyric for the last. I have this like outro part that's one of those, you know, like the end of the Paul McCartney song or the other song where it does a canon, a repeat thing. Okay, well, in rewriting the lyrics, I remembered a conversation I had with my dad about this event a few years ago. I was down there visiting Colombia, and I told him, you know, you remember that you guys forgot? He actually couldn't remember, but he told me something. He said, you know what it might have been? Right around that time is when your grandpa got really sick. And I remember this because I remember them rushing to the hospital all the time, and it was a big thing. So what is very likely is that they were dealing with one of these crises, and no one's mind was on anything other than that. So I rewrote both my narrative and the ending of the song to be this realization. So like the ending lyric is, in time an older wind rises up, and in time an older wind rises up and lifts us out from the ash of youth, flying over our life like an eagle, spotting moments we missed. And it's this idea that, like, as you get older, if you revisit, because in this case it was revisiting and talking to my dad about it, right. I got this different, I got to see the mental picture of the 3D image and see like a little different angle to it. Now, it doesn't take away, of course I was hurt that day, and of course that sucks for a little kid. But there's this other aspect. Like, there was, my grandpa was suffering, and the family was trying to help with that, and everyone was consumed by it. And it gave me a different appreciation of the whole thing. Yeah. So if I had those little devices, like, that's what would have happened. I would have like seen the photo and been like, oh shoot, there's my grandpa suffering, you know? And it was a fascinating experience that it took me these many years to come to terms with. Yeah.
And it just makes you wonder how many narratives we're walking around with that are inaccurate.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear that not all memories, including the memories that are evoked from the episode with Philip, it's not always like a positive spin, which can seem like that's what we're talking about. That if you really look at it, there's actually a silver lining, or it's not as bad as you're making it out to be. If anything, what Philip learned was worse.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and same in my example. What I've learned is, oh yeah, that's when my grandpa started the process of dying.
But for yours, it was a more positive spin, right? It wasn't that no one cared. It was that they were distracted.
Yeah, but
that was a much more positive.
But it's similar to his case. It's not that she didn't care. It's that they missed each other.
Yeah, but my larger point is that to quote unquote dwell in the past can result in a lot of things. And what it represents to me, mental health wise and wellness wise and soul wise, is that if we're revisiting the past, you know, like if Philip had sat down and looked at the pictures and been like, oh yeah, that's funny, I have these things. And the AI was like, do you remember anything? And he's just like, yeah, I don't know. It was so long ago. I don't really remember. And the AI is like, well, really try to jog your memory. And he's like, okay, you know, I'm really trying to remember. And, you know, I just remember we kind of broke up under bad circumstances, and I remember there were some good times. And, you know, I probably fucked some things up around, but I don't know. I kind of remember her being maybe a jerk face. We fought a lot. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, if he had that kind of attitude, then that would tell me that the Philip character didn't have any unfinished business around it, right? But if we're finding ourselves staring at the picture and wanting to revisit that, if we're finding ourselves writing a song, or we find ourselves
recording it 20, 30 years later,
or finding yourself going to your dad 3 years ago and saying like, Dad, do you kind of remember? Then there's an unmet need. There's unfinished business. Something's going on. It's not fucking dwelling in the past. There's a need. And even if the answer to the question, like the diagnosis of cancer or something, finally, you know, comes to be realized, another realization that could have happened when you brought it up with your dad is he'd be like, yeah, I don't really remember anything about that. And then he doesn't really, and then he changes the subject. Yeah. As if he's, again, doesn't really care.
Right.
Well, that sucks. That's a very different narrative than what ultimately happened, but still might actually finish the business or at least move the ball down the road of just like, oh,
I see.
You know, as a 50-year-old man, you know, bumping up against this apathy and this lack of empathy towards me, I can process it differently and can kind of reprocess the pain I went through. You know, there's a lot of things that happen even in the face of realizing a worse narrative potentially, or reaffirming the bad narrative. Good things can happen from those revisitings. I just hate the notions of like, you're dwelling in the past, or why visit it? If your body wants to visit it, then it might be a good idea to visit it, is the thing. Yeah. Anyway, some other themes are that Gen X, we're entering this stage of life, whether it's staring at photos or people dying or regret or old age or something. And this episode, I felt really represented it well. Yeah. That sort of aspect of late middle-agedness that is very particular and specifically represented in this episode because of the nature of the photos. You know, because for people that are older than us, they wouldn't have a lot of photos. No. The kinds of photos that you take at a party, you know, or even just having a 20s where you had parties. You know, a lot of like our parents.
No, that's a good point. Yeah.
They got married at 22 and that
they
was
go to work.
Yeah. And people that are younger than us, they have phones and video and a lot more media. You know, they had their own cameras when they were 10 and have like tons and tons of stuff, and have probably stayed in contact, and they could text people and, you know, not have misunderstandings.
Oh yeah, that's true. It's like, hey, did you get my letter?
Yeah. But that feeling for our generation of like, we're, you know, another aspect of the older generation is that they wouldn't even be contacted in a situation like this because the kids wouldn't even know how to contact the ex, right? Whereas in today's world, and not in this story, but for us now, it's like we find each other on Facebook, and then you know, we have a very tentative connection that can be exploited with death, and you know, because you can get into their account and look at all the friends. It's like, oh, my mom was friends with these 500 people. I can now send out this DM saying, oh, by the way, she died. And, you know, like we're of that generation of that weird kind of in-between thing. And we're heading into that zone where this is going to happen more and more, where our exes and our people in our past are going to reemerge through death, and we'll revisit these kinds of things in a way that every generation has, but in a specific way that this episode really represents.
Yeah, that's true.
So final word on Eulogy, Berto.
I really enjoyed it. Like I said, it was my only 10 for the season. I liked a lot of the other episodes, but this one was the best. Paul Giamatti, what a force of nature. It made me want to have that tool as well. It also made me want to have a lot. I do have photos from my childhood, but I'm missing a lot. I have almost nothing of my 20s, you know?
Right, because I was in the 90s. I noted even then that I was one of the I was the only person that had a video camera.
Yeah,
that's for sure. And I was one of the only people that took photos.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford a camera, but my friend didn't use his point and shoot camera, and I used that. And I remember film was $5 for a roll of 36. And developing it was another $5. Mm-hmm. That was $10 I did not have, and so I took pictures very sparingly. Yeah. But I knew it was important. Sometimes I had enough money to buy the film, but not enough money to process it. Oh. So I would take the pictures, knowing that maybe in 10 years I'll have a better job, and that would happen sometimes.
Yeah.
But I took the time because I had a feeling that in the future, maybe even just a year later, I would want these pictures. Yeah.
Well, now I need the AI to go in my brain and recreate it.
And another step to this whole thing, just to tell you how neurotic I am about this, is that in the aughts, I made sure to keep all these photos in the same place. You're moving around, and there's boxes that get lost out. I always made sure. And then once scanning technology at home became a possibility, I spent the time to scan every single photograph, and then crop it, and then title it, try to figure out the date. I have done, and not everyone needs to be this weird about it, but
sure.
But I've done a lot of it. Now, when AI eventually comes out and it's kind of here now, where it can just look through all your photos and just put the date and the people and the titles in it, like it'll just know exactly where you are on Google Map and everything. I'm going to be upset
that you had to do it manually.
It's sort of like when Napster and Kazaa first came out.
Yeah,
and bandwidth and such was that if I wanted an album, I had to individually find every song.
Right.
I would have to rename all of them. I'd have to change the metadata, put it in a folder that's for the album. And then fast forward a couple years, and you could just download the entire discography of one artist, and it would all have, the metadata would be all perfect, and I'd just be like, fuck. Oh. Well, in fact, even going back a little further, when Napster and Kazaa first came out, but you couldn't find every song. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to digitize, because I had all these records, all this vinyl. I literally recorded my vinyl into my computer and made and cropped it into individual. I had MP3 files that had the crackle of the record player. And then fast forward a few years, and I didn't have to do any of that shit, because you would have to listen to the songs real time. Right. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, of course. There's no double speed.
Oh, Gen X and our stupid shit. Anyway, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because
you deserve it.